What's up, everybody? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we got to talk about the LA Lakers. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like rating on it, and you can also subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this every single day. With those things said, let's go ahead and get started. So we haven't talked about the Lakers in a little bit, at least in terms of a full-length video. Discussed them a little bit earlier in the week in terms of some things that I got wrong this season. The Lakers certainly were on that list. But now we got to kind of check back in with them. I've left it alone for a little while. I've kind of evaluated them. I've sat back and been like, okay, they need to get healthy. They haven't had LeBron. They've tried to integrate Russ into the situation. Maybe Anthony Davis starts to turn it on. Maybe these role player guys will come back and really help them. They're still a disaster. And there's so many things wrong here with this group. There's so many things wrong in terms of kind of what this means for their future. I'm going to go through one by one. First, let's talk about the basketball stuff, and then we'll get to arguably the worst part of this whole situation. So I'll begin with Russ, but I won't really talk about him a ton because everybody kind of knows what the problem is with Russ and this team. Turns the ball over too much, not a fantastic decision maker or playmaker. And when he's off the ball, he's just not a spacer. He's not a guy that's going to be able to make shots off the ball as a three-point shooter. And those kinds of players just typically don't work in the LeBron ecosystem. Really, within the last 5 or 6 years, certainly in the time that LeBron's been in LA, the only perimeter non-shooter that I can think of that had success around LeBron was Rondo in the bubble, but Rondo was making jump shots in the bubble and he was a three-point spacer, and Russ just isn't that. And it's going to continue to be an issue in terms of late game execution, their spacing. It's all around bad. But we've talked plenty about Russ. Anthony Davis. I don't have an explanation for the way that AD has looked this season. And statistically, I mean, you can't argue with the numbers that he's putting up on a per game basis, but there's just something different about him. He's not quite on the same level defensively. He's one of the worst high volume jump shooters in the league. Mid-range three doesn't matter. One of the worst jump shooters in the league statistically in terms of efficiency. And he's just not the same guy. There's a lot of theories out there about why that is. Him playing the 4 could be part of it. Obviously a guy that has kind of been reluctant to play the 5 in the past. Obviously the jump shot's not falling doesn't help and kind of limits what he can do with the rest of his game. Some people have hypothesized that it's because he's gotten stronger and he's put on more weight, and that has limited some of the athleticism that made him as great of a player as he was. But the bottom line is the case for not giving up on the Lakers, and I've pretty much given up on them at this point in terms of like a top tier contender. The case for that was always, no matter how bad everything else looks, it's still LeBron, it's still Anthony Davis. If you have those two guys in a playoff series, you have a chance if they're healthy. I'm not sure that that's the case anymore. With the way that AD looks, again, statistically, you can't argue with it, but when you watch him, you can't tell me he's the same guy. I don't know if he's hurt. I don't know if it's the weight thing. And then we'll get to LeBron here in a second. But that's a huge, huge concern. I mean, more so than LeBron, more so than Russ, more so than anything else on this roster. The future of the Lakers is tied directly to Anthony Davis and his ability to drive winning basketball teams. I mean, there was, back in New Orleans, Anthony Davis, there were advanced stats that would tell you that he was the most valuable player in the league. In his first couple of years in LA, specifically in the bubble, he looked like a guy that was going to be a top 2, top 3 player in the league, and he's just not that right now. And that's just really, really frustrating for a team that looked like it was going to be a competitor coming into the season, a contender, and they just haven't been that. And then LeBron, I don't have any like huge, gigantic issues with LeBron because he gets more of a benefit of the doubt than any of these other guys. But there are some concerning signs. Drives are down. Free throws are down. 3-point attempts are up. He's not shooting the ball particularly well from 3. And it's not even like an eye test thing. It's not even a statistical thing. I mean, stats still look great. Eye test wise, he still looks really good. It's always a concern when you see a guy that's getting older that's not attacking the rim as much, and a guy that's dealt with injury issues the last couple of seasons not being as aggressive. And typically when free throws start to go down, I mean, look at pretty much any superstar player across the history of the league. When your free throw attempts start to go down, that's generally not a good sign. Now, granted, again, he gets more of a benefit of the doubt than arguably anybody else in the league. And you could argue that he's just taking the approach of, I don't want to take punishment in the regular season. I don't want to get hurt in the regular season. I'm still going to help my team, but I'm just going to take more jump shots and I'm going to try and contribute in other ways. And then when I need to in the postseason, I'll become bubble LeBron. I'll turn it on. I'll be attacking the rim. I'll be making jump shots and all will be fine with the world. And maybe that's all this team needs because they're one of the worst offensive teams in the entire league. They score on a points per game basis at a really high rate. They're the 5th highest scoring team in the league, but they have the 2nd fastest pace. And overall, in terms of offensive efficiency, they're 24th. So maybe that's the juice that this team needs is LeBron attacking, getting to the rim, kicking it out to open shooters. The problem is 3 of those guys are not making jump shots in terms of the guys that are starting the game if Anthony Davis is not playing the 5. You've got Russ, not going to make jump shots. AD, we just talked about being one of the worst high volume jump shooters in the league. And then whoever the 5 is not a spacer either. So LeBron attacking the rim with one spacer is just not going to work. And I don't really know how they remedy that issue because even if you move AD to the 5, you're still only working with at most 2 floor spacers. And in general, they're not shooting the ball particularly well either. So the reason all this comes up is, of course, they have the really good game against Boston and then they lose to Memphis without Dillon Brooks, without John Moran. A Memphis team that's been playing really well lately, but still, I mean, there's no reason for the Lakers to be losing by double digits to a team that's missing that many guys. And there's concerning losses for every team across the league. You know, there's teams giving up late leads. There's the Nets losing to Houston without Kevin Durant. Houston was missing half their roster as well. But back to the Lakers, the point is, if this was any other team with the exact same roster, I just don't think we'd be giving them this much of the benefit of the doubt in terms of them being contenders. Like, I think a lot of people still consider them that. And I just kind of don't at this point. But here's the last point, and here's the biggest detriment possibly of the Russ trade. It's not Russ on the court and the lack of a fit and them trying to figure that stuff out. It's that they don't have options. They don't have anywhere to go. Had they made the other trade, which was they would have brought in Buddy Hield for, I believe, Kuzma first and Harrell. In that scenario, they would have kept KCP. They would have had some other options here. One, I think they would have been a better basketball team. But if it didn't go well, you could have flipped Buddy Hield for something else. Or KCP and some stuff. You had some other moves. You had some other options. You basically only moved Kuzma and then that pick that you would have had in that draft. You still had some maneuvering to do. This Russ trade at the time and now has just locked them in to this group. This is the team that they have to make it work with. There is no emergency panic Russ trade that exists here that's going to allow them to shake up this roster in a significant way. That trade already happened, and it's the one that they made to get Russ in the first place. Like, nobody else is going to trade for this guy. Washington was able to find the one team in the league that would have given up legitimate assets in exchange for Russell Westbrook, and it was the Lakers. And that's the biggest issue here is I want the Lakers to be good. There's no bias here, but I'd like to say there's some light at the end of the tunnel. There's some hope. There's some opportunity for them to improve. But on the court, I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen anything that makes me think, oh, well, LeBron starts driving more, then Anthony Davis starts making more jump shots, and Russ suddenly becomes a better spacer. I just think they're an inherently flawed team. They're too old in their role player guys. They're not shooting the ball well enough, and they don't have enough spacers around a LeBron team. And it feels like those LeBron teams in the past that have failed. It feels like that first-year Lakers team. It feels like a team that is just not going to perform. And if that's the case with the roster, then you have to look at, okay, well, how can we move some pieces? And the Russ trade means that they can't do that. And at this point, like, unless we see some kind of significant improvement, until proven otherwise, I'm not considering the Lakers a contender for the NBA title. And I know that they have LeBron James, and I know that they have Anthony Davis. And you could argue that if those guys were healthy last postseason, they would have made a run. And LeBron always seems to find a way to make a run. But the fact of the matter is, if this wasn't the Lakers, we would not be giving this team the benefit of the doubt. We would not be discussing them nearly as much as a possible contender when they're a 500 basketball team that's losing to half of the Memphis Grizzlies. That's the bottom line. And so that's where I basically landed on the Lakers is I don't know what's happening with AD. Russ is Russ. LeBron is playing differently, and there's no outs. There's no movement. There's no flexibility. There's nothing. And so it's going to come down to, can they make the Russ thing work? Can AD get out of this funk? And can LeBron become prime LeBron again in the postseason if they get to the postseason? There is still that part of me in the back of my mind that's wondering, are they just figuring it out? They did go through a pretty significant roster shakeup, but when you look at their offseason, prioritizing Talen Horton-Tucker over Alex Caruso and the Russ trade, they might have just screwed it up. They might have ruined it. They might have really eliminated their opportunity to be true championship contenders. And this LeBron era in LA might just result in one title. We'll see. There's still an opportunity here for some things to change, but I just quite frankly don't really foresee any at the moment. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on the screen as well. And yeah, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day. Once again, my name is Tucker, and I will see you all next time.